On February 26, 1959, searchers found Igor Dyatlov's tent on Kholat Syakhl, damaged and apparently cut open from the inside. That is the first hard clue. 9 experienced Soviet hikers had not returned from a winter route in the northern Urals. Their camp was on an exposed slope. Their tracks led away from the tent toward the forest. Some had left without proper boots or winter clothing. The popular version asks why they fled. The better evidence question is sharper. What threat could make a trained group leave shelter in lethal cold, then fail to return? The 1950 trial blamed a compelling natural force. Later theories blamed weapons, animals, panic, outsiders, and the supernatural. But the most serious modern answer is smaller, colder, and more believable: a snow slab, darkness, wind, and one bad campsite. Confirmed, the group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a student from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. They were not reckless tourists wandering into a storm for a thrill. They were experienced ski hikers on a demanding route, the kind of expedition that required skill, planning, and endurance. That matters because many weak theories begin by making the hikers foolish. The record points in a different direction. These were capable young people operating in severe terrain, under Soviet winter conditions, with limited rescue options if something went wrong. A respectful investigation has to preserve both facts at once. They were experienced, and the mountain could still beat them. Confirmed, the final camp was not deep in sheltered forest. It was on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. The name is often translated in dramatic ways, but the real evidence is geographic, not mythical. The camp sat on snow, wind, and exposure. Below it was a forested area that offered more shelter. Above and around it was open mountain. The group may have chosen the slope to keep altitude, to practice winter camping, or simply because weather and route errors made better choices harder. Interpretive, this choice may be the hinge of the case. Not because it proves negligence, but because it placed a fabric tent between 9 people, and a night where small snow movement could become a life or death signal. Confirmed, Dyatlov was expected to send word after the group returned. When that message did not come, concern grew. Delays on winter expeditions were not automatically disasters, so the alarm was not instant, but by late February, search teams were moving through the route. This time gap matters. The tent was found weeks after the night of the incident. Wind, snowfall, drift, animal activity, and thawing patterns could all change the scene. That is why later arguments about tracks, snow depth, and missing avalanche debris are difficult. Searchers did not walk into a frozen crime scene at dawn. They found a mountain that had been rewriting the evidence for weeks. Confirmed, tracks led from the tent downhill toward the forest. This is one of the strongest clues against a simple attack story. The evidence does not show a chaotic chase by outsiders. It suggests the hikers left together or in an organized sequence, moving away from the tent toward shelter. But the condition of their clothing turns that movement into a puzzle. Some were inadequately dressed for the extreme cold. Leaving without proper protection only makes sense if staying at the tent felt more dangerous than exposure. That is the narrow doorway through which most serious theories must pass. Whatever happened had to be urgent enough to drive them out, but not necessarily visible weeks later. Confirmed, the first bodies were found near a cedar tree and traces of a fire. This detail is often presented like horror, but it can also be read as survival. The forest was shelter. A fire was rational. Climbing or breaking branches may have been an attempt to get wood, gain sight of the tent, or signal others. Interpretive, the group may have split after reaching the forest. Some may have tried to return to the tent for supplies. Others may have tried to build a more durable shelter near a ravine. This pattern is tragic, but it is not irrational. It looks like people trying to solve a problem after the first problem had already taken away their best option. Confirmed, the medical findings were mixed. Several deaths were attributed to hypothermia, while others involved serious blunt trauma. This is where the legend usually becomes lurid. We will not do that. The important evidence point is not shock value, it is mechanism. Could the injuries come from a fall into a ravine? Could a snow slab strike people lying in a tent? Could later conditions change soft tissue and make the scene look stranger than it was? Those are evidence questions. The injuries are why a simple cold weather exposure story feels incomplete, but they do not automatically prove weapons, monsters, or murder. Confirmed, The Soviet investigation closed the case with a conclusion often translated as a compelling natural force. That phrase is vague enough to feed decades of speculation. It does not name a killer. It does not provide a detailed mechanism. It does not fully explain the tent, the tracks, the injuries, and the survival attempts. But it also does not prove a cover-up. Interpretive. Part of the Dyatlov mystery grew because the official answer was both natural and incomplete. When an investigation leaves a blank space, audiences fill it, sometimes with science, sometimes with rumor, sometimes with fear. Confirmed, Russian prosecutors revisited the case and announced an avalanche-based conclusion in 2020. Their scenario was not a giant movie avalanche sweeping everyone away. It was closer to a sudden snow threat that forced evacuation in darkness and low visibility. In this model, the hikers leave the tent. Because the tent area is dangerous, they move downhill toward the forest. They try to survive, split, return, and shelter. Likely, extreme cold and poor visibility turned that evacuation into a one-way decision. Disputed, whether the slope, snowpack, and injury pattern are fully explained by that conclusion. The official modern answer is stronger than conspiracy theories, but still not accepted by everyone. Confirmed, in 2021, researchers Johann Gaum and Alexander Puzrin published a model arguing that a delayed slab avalanche could explain key parts of the incident. The idea is specific. The hikers cut into the slope to place the tent. Wind transported snow. Hours later, a compact slab could release above the tent. Not a huge avalanche, but a heavy block of snow capable of damaging the shelter and injuring people inside. That model helps explain why the group might cut out through the tent, why some injuries were severe, and why obvious avalanche debris might not be clear weeks later. Disputed, models are not time machines. They test plausibility. They do not replay the night. Still, this is one of the strongest scientific explanations available. Disputed claims still surround Dyatlov Pass, strange lights, military tests, infrasound, secret weapons, outsiders, and supernatural theories. Some details deserve cautious discussion. The Soviet context was secretive. Records were imperfect. Witness reports can matter. But a theory must explain the whole evidence map, not just one strange detail. It must explain the tent cut from inside, the tracks to the forest, the partial clothing, the fire, the attempts to return, the injuries, the time gap, and the winter conditions. Most sensational theories explain one clue by ignoring 5 others. That is why the snow slab explanation is not boring. It is powerful because it tries to account for the whole system. So what is the responsible answer? Confirmed, 9 hikers died after leaving a damaged tent on Kholat Syakhl in early February 1959. Confirmed, the tent appears to have been cut from inside. Confirmed, tracks led toward the forest. Confirmed, hypothermia and blunt trauma were both part of the medical record. Likely, a natural snow event, possibly a delayed slab avalanche, forced the group into a survival crisis. Disputed, the exact trigger, injury sequence, and whether every detail fits one model. Unresolved, the full minute-by-minute story of that night. Dyatlov Pass is not frightening because nature broke its laws. It is frightening because nature may have followed them exactly, while people in the dark had no time to calculate the equation. The tent is still the doorway. The tracks are still the timeline. The slab model is still the strongest attempt to connect the clues without inventing a villain. But the case remains powerful because the final moments were never recorded. Which clue matters most to you, the tent cut from inside, the tracks to the forest, or the injuries the slab model tries to explain? Tell us your evidence priority, and follow the Mystery Atlas TV for investigations where the mystery is handled with respect, not noise.